Who Wants to Be a London Mayor? A live debate from Westminster, presented by Alastair Stewart.
Good evening and welcome live to a Carlton Television Evening Standard debate. Who wants to be a London mayor? The rules are very simple. 4 main contenders want the biggest job in London. Frank Dobson, Ken Livingstone, Steve Norris and Susan Kramer are here live tonight to apply for that job. 5 million Londoners will decide, of course, who gets it. And this evening, 600 of them are here in this hall. And by the way, candidates cannot phone a friend, nor can they ask the audience. Tonight, we listen to them and we ask the questions. The editor of the Evening Standard, Max Hastings, will be leading the way with the questions, alongside Queen Mary University of London professor Lisa Jardine. A big round of applause for them. First, let's hear from the men and the woman who want that crucial job. Now, we've asked each of them to prepare a minute manifesto. A little while ago, we drew lots to determine who would go first. And again, the rules here are very simple. No heckling, please. Just listen to them, and then we'll ask the questions a little bit later on. So, first out of our hat, and with his vision for London, would you please welcome Steve Norris.
We all know the issues in this election. It's about transport. But to me, that's specifically a 24-hour system for a 24-hour city. It's about a 70p flat fare. It's about a decent ticketing system at last. It's about bus priority that actually works. And it's about crime and security. To me, that means 3 things. It means the basic security that every Londoner should be entitled to. It means the respect with which every Londoner is entitled to be treated equal respect. And it means, incidentally, doing something about the need to put policemen actually on the streets of this city, 6,000 more of them than we currently have at present. It's also about the 250,000 people in this city who don't have jobs in one of the richest cities on the planet that still has 6 of the 10 poorest boroughs in Britain. And it's about a housing problem in a city where a police officer married to a teacher can scarcely afford to live. Above all, it's about action, not politics, because action is what London deserves. Thank you.
Next up, the Member of Parliament for Holborn and St Pancras. He used to run the health service, now he wants to run London. Please welcome Frank Dobson.
Thank you. London is a wonderful place, but it isn't like that for everyone. I know from my own experience, living here, bringing up a family here, depending on local schools, local hospitals, local transport. And I'm sick of the things that are wrong with London. Old people afraid to walk down the street where they live, parents fearful when their children go out of the house, people in outer London finding their journey to work taking twice as long as it should, young Londoners ill-equipped to get a job. I want to be mayor to help change all that. But the mayor can't do what's needed alone. He'll have to work in partnership with all sorts of people all over London, young and old, rich and poor, black and white and Asian. My record shows I'm good at working with people, at getting the best out of them. And now I want the best for London. Thank you.
Now we're going to hear from a woman who, by polling day, will have walked up and down every high street in London gauging voter opinion. Well, this evening, it's a shorter walk for her so that we can hear her opinions. Please welcome Susan Kramer.
Rescuing public transport, reducing crime and the fear of crime, revitalising our diverse communities and neighbourhoods. That is my programme for London. My background is business and finance, not politics. I know I can keep the tube in public hands and find the money for investment. I will work with the Metropolitan Police to get 3,000 more police on the beat. I will strengthen our local high streets, increase affordable housing and grow local jobs. My career in business has taught me to bring people together, businesses, local residents, governments. This race is about London issues, and I know those issues because I'm a Londoner, born and brought up in this city. I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to win this race for mayor with your vote and your support. I'll tackle the problems of crime, of transport and our rundown communities. We can do it for London. Thank you.
He was the last main candidate to throw his hat in the ring, and he was the last candidate out of our hat. To deliver his Minute Manifesto, would you please welcome Ken Livingstone.
That you can say that you agree with the policy prescriptions you've just heard from the other candidates, but I think we all can. I think that's interesting because, in a sense, this election's gone on far too long, it's been far too negative, and I think Londoners have had enough of it. And the first task of the mayor is to draw a line behind the divisiveness of the campaign and unite Londoners. And that's why I've made it absolutely clear I will want, if I'm mayor, an administration that brings all talents together. I look at Frank Dobson and see someone I'd want in my cabinet leading the crusade against poverty, because I know he believes in that. I want someone like Susan Kramer, who has an expertise in raising bonds to provide cheap funding for our underground, and I would like her talents. And I'd also expect to see, perhaps unusually, a Conservative like Steve Norris coming in to be a voice that represents the motorists and the road haulage lobby, who are vital to London as well. I also made absolutely clear that whilst I'll be voting for my local Labour candidate in Brenton Harrow for the Assembly, I want a Green voice in our Assembly. I think it's time, when we look around the environmental problems in London, we really move up a notch in tackling those. And I'm asking, therefore, Londoners to do as I'm going to do and cast my vote for the Assembly list for a Green candidate, so we can have a Green voice on every committee in the Assembly, tackling not just the environmental problems, but the health of Londoners too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. OK, they've told us in brief what they stand for, but the devil, as always, is in the detail. And it's time now to subject our wannabe mayors to some detailed questioning. Leading the way for us initially, two people with London running through them like Brighton does the Rock. Max Hastings from the London Evening Standard and Lisa Jardine. And Max has the first question for Ken.
Ken, why do you think that you are attracting so much support? Is a vote for you a vote for the government of London or for giving two fingers to Tony Blair?
There may be an element that this is a mid-term protest, in which case I'm glad it's coming to me than someone else. But I think the majority of people are voting for me because they recognise that I am a Londoner, and the things that I fought for 20 years ago, good public transport, subsidising the underground, bringing black people and women into senior positions at the GLC, these have become mainstream politics, and I think that they recognise that that's work that still needs to be completed.
But isn't it embarrassing for you that Michael Heseltine called himself president of Tories for Livingston? An awful lot of people want you to be mayor who are no friends of yours, but who think you're going to give Tony Blair a very hard time.
Well, I think they'll be disappointed because this is only going to work if the Mayor and the Prime Minister work together. As someone who's always believed in devolution, I want it to work. I want it to be patterned for the devolution that Tony Blair will have for the English regions if we get a second term. And at the end of the day, if the Mayor speaks for London, not just one narrow sectarian strand, I think we can get a Mayor that will work with the Prime Minister.
Ken, can I come in here because we were bound to get this kind of discussion between, as it were, the politicians or the media representatives in relation to the mayoral candidates. But Londoners, and you've got a whole room full of Londoners here, want to know what you're going to do for London. And I want to ask you directly, you've got these transport policies, you've got vital policies for London. Is our council tax going to skyrocket as a result of your policies?
The Mayor has virtually no control over council tax. That remains with the borough. I think the money coming from the council tax to the Mayor's budget is £3 a year for each householder.
But that's numbers, okay, so what are you going to do about
making sure... Well, it's a pretty big number, okay, I have to say, just £3 a year.
But what we want to know is, you know, Londoners pay more tax into the central coffers than anyone else in the country. We want to get it back. How are you going to lobby to get it back for us?
I mean, all I want for Londoners is the same level of support that Gordon Brown has got for the people of Scotland. We're sustaining good services in Scotland. I think Londoners have got a right to expect the same level of service. It's wrong that someone dies waiting for surgery in London, whereas if they were living in Scotland, they get that surgery. You can't justify that.
And then my last question for you is, you've said we know where you stand on big business, or at least the way the media represents it. Again, in this room, there are a lot of small businessmen. I'm married to a small businessman. Tell me how you're going to serve the small business community.
Well, I think the problem in London has been that the big financial institutions don't put the support in that you would get, say, in Germany. There are regional banks that actually help develop small businesses into middle-ranking businesses, and I want either our London banks to actually do more work in that area, or to help the Mayor set up a regional bank that would develop small businesses and give them that boost into the bigger league.
Max, your question to Frank Dobson.
Frank, a year ago, you were a cabinet minister, a respected and highly successful Secretary of State for Health. Today we're hearing that the bookies are taking no more money on Ken Livingstone. What's gone wrong?
Well, all I can say is in politics you've got to chance your arm. I believed in having an executive mayor for London. I was the shadow minister who put it into our manifesto at the last general election. I helped make sure that we delivered on that manifesto commitment. And although I was thoroughly enjoying my job as Secretary of State for Health, I ended up by saying to Tony Blair, I would rather be Mayor of London.
But how could you have ended up as the underdog in this campaign? What does it say about the government? What does it say about what's gone wrong with this campaign?
Well, I think Ken was the overdog, shall we say, partly because he'd been campaigning for rather a long time before anyone else had, and I know that the Labour selection was a bit of a mess, but not particularly my fault. But all I can say is this, Max. Ever since last October, what I've tried to get over to Londoners is the policies that I want to see to make London a safer place, to have a modern transport system, and to get the jobs into London, particularly that the 250,000 Londoners need. That's what I've been concentrating on, and that's what I'll be concentrating on from now until the polls close.
One critical point, Frank.
I want to move to Lisa now. I want to try and get some cut and thrust here. Lisa.
Well, I have to declare an interest here. Frank Dobson is my constituency MP, and in fact we've been in correspondence about the drug problem in my street. I live in Bloomsbury, and my problem is direct to Frank, actually on that basis, which is we have people shooting up in the telephone box at the end of my street. We've exchanged letters, you've exchanged letters with the police. It's made no difference whatsoever to the drug shooting up in the phone box. So if we can't deal with that problem, how is the mayor going to deal? You all talk grandly about dealing with drugs on a grand scale. How are you going to deal with crime in the city?
Well, I think we do have to deal with drugs on the grand scale, like stopping them coming into the country, stopping the financial institutions laundering the money back to the people who are supplying the drugs.
Street?
But we also need the detailed attention on every part of the street. And you know as well as I do that spotting people selling drugs on the street is as easy as spotting people selling ice cream.
Yes, spotting a policeman is a lot harder.
Yeah, we need more police, and that's one of the reasons why I've been campaigning for a long time now for the present government to restore the accommodation allowance which the previous government took away from the Metropolitan Police, so that a new police officer today is getting £6,000, £4,000 fewer than he would otherwise have been getting. And I'm confident that the government will be restoring that allowance. That will help us get more police.
Max.
Steve Norris, you're in favour of privatising the tube. Now, all the signs and all the polls suggest that this is a vote loser. Has this been a big mistake for your campaign?
No, I've always made it clear that I think over the last 20 years we've seen what private capital can actually do, and I don't see why the Underground should ever have been excluded from that essential proposition. In fact, the irony is, of course, that it hasn't been. I mean, the Northern Line trains, which people are now using, delivered under a public-private partnership, which I myself was instrumental in delivering, has brought the trains forward something like 8 years from when you would otherwise have had them. We've got the Connect project at the moment, which is going to give us, as it happens, the appalling prospect of being able to use your mobile phone on the tube, but as a consequence of it, you actually get better telecommunications. We've got the power supply contract, the ticketing contract called Prestige. All of this is actually using private money. Now, I'm not obsessed with ownership, to be honest. I mean, if you want to say, you know, are you a sort of committed privatizer? I think that privatisation has worked an enormous amount of advantage over a huge range of industries. But if people are, and the present government is, committed to the idea of overall public ownership, that doesn't mean to say that you can't get public and private working together sensibly to make a difference. Because I'll tell you the one thing, Max, it's perfectly obvious. People give a hell of a sight less of a damn about who the ultimate owner of the system is than they do about it working. If you actually make it work, that is what people want.
Lisa Jardine?
I mean, the applause says what I was going to start my question with. It's so easy. You can all do that question. You can all do the transport question.
Can you, Lisa? Can you really? You see, the trouble is that that's precisely what you can't do if, for example, like Ken, you would sooner turn money down because you don't like where it's coming from.
I'm not,
as far as I'm concerned,
I'm not one of those
politicos.
I want to know.
That's terrific.
And
if I get it from the private sector, I'll have it from them.
I want to know about the things that I really care about, that I really care about for London. Your party is now running on scares about immigration, bogus asylum seekers, beggars on the tube, cleaning up our streets from child beggars. London is a city of diversity. London is a multicultural city. London is a city that has been refreshed. Thank you. I've been taken second fiddle to Max all this time. I will ask my question. It's a city of diversity, and we have heard very little about how those people who feed our city, who are our city, who revitalise our city, are not going to be demonised. How are you going to serve that London?
Well, actually, if you were listening to what I said in my minute manifesto, and I excuse you if, like the rest of the world, you'll have hardly taken any of it in, because I think that's the danger with minute manifestos. What you would have heard me say is, this is a city where 1 in 4 voters come from an ethnic minority, but 1 in 3 of our citizens come from an ethnic minority background. You simply cannot have a city where equality and respect are not the recognised fundamental qualities that govern the way you police the city, the way they manage the city, and that's one of the reasons why I've said that, as far as I'm concerned, my Greater London Authority, the personal appointments I make, the dozen personal appointments I make to the top echelon, and what I expect the Assembly to do for their appointments, will look like London. Half the appointments will be women. There will be at least a quarter, if not a 1/3, from ethnic minorities. You have to lead by example.
Okay.
Okay.
Lisa Jardine? I know he's right. A question. Max again, sorry, but I am going ping pong,
Susan,
so do you.
You know, it goes 1,
You
2,
said,
1, 2. Right.
Max.
Susan, you've said that if you become mayor, you'll recruit 3,000 extra police. The police at the moment are busting themselves to try and recruit extra policemen. How are you going to do what the Met are failing to do at present?
Well, the core of the problem is frankly pay, and the Met and I absolutely agree on that. If you ask Sir John Stevens today, that is what he will tell you. In the last 5 years, we've lost 3,000 police. Now, I want them back. And we've lost them because the cost of living allowance for new policemen here is £1,662, as if that would pay the difference in your rent in central London versus living in a Yorkshire village. And we have to change that. It's absolutely key. We also need to change morale in the Met. I mean, morale has plummeted, and that takes leadership, and it's going to take both political leadership and leadership by Sir John Stevens and the other senior officers. Now, that kind of commitment, combined with pay and looking at the working conditions, we can do it. I do not accept that we must live without the 3,000 police that we have lost. We need them on the beat. Think of Lisa's question a few minutes ago. We don't see policemen today, and yet we have problems like drugs on our street, and they must be tackled.
Susan, can I ask you a question which is, again, I think it's been left out of the agenda of the mayoral race, and it certainly troubles someone like me. London is a great city. It's a great city like Paris. It's a great city like Madrid. Paris has its pay pyramid, and Bilbao has its Guggenheim Museum. It's taken 20 years to get to a rather cautious refurbishment of the South Bank. You're in business. What are we going to do to turn London back into that kind of magnet city in terms of the visual impact, in terms of its building, that the London Eye suddenly made us?
Well, I think London is a glorious city. And I love the London Eye, but I have to tell you, my focus as mayor is going to be looking after the people in a sense who've been left out. It's regeneration of our poorest areas. It's fixing absolutely core problems like public transport, because when I go out and talk to Londoners, what they want to know is where that bus is at 7:30 on Wednesday morning when they need to get to work.
Does that mean...
I accept that we can't neglect the visual environment. And that we can improve by working with our architects and our planners and asking people to let creative ideas flow.
Susan,
but first, the mayor must fix the problems.
I'm going to have to cut in because we're going to take a break, but there's bags more time still to come, more questioning. We're going to return in literally just a couple of minutes to find out who you'd like to return as Mayor of London. Kramer versus Norris versus Dobson versus Livingston. Who do you want to be a London Mayor? We gave a select band of voters an early chance to go into a booth and make that most private of democratic declarations public. And by the way, if you think Tony's vote's a foregone conclusion, it all depends which Tony you talk to.
I should be voting for Frank Dobson because he's an honest and a decent man. A man who can get the best out of a Labour government without either being a stooge of the government or an opponent of the government.
I'm going to vote for Ken Livingstone because I believe he's the only candidate who's truly independent. I believe that Cockney Ken will put my city above his party.
I'd make MPs always use public transport. Then we'd see a rapid improvement.
What would you do? Tell the world and win great prizes at voteformayor.com.
British Airways, introducing the next generation of air travel.
Welcome to the electronic economy, where competition is intense, speed is indispensable, and only the strongest business models survive. In this environment, you can do almost anything, except fake it.
Ben, I think it's time we finished our relationship. I've met someone else.
And I've just won the lottery.
Want to make sure you're acting on the most up-to-date information? With BT's e-business solutions, you can.
OnMail is the new way to email anywhere in the world through your TV.
We've got a very good friend in New Zealand who came to the wedding, etc. I'm a terrible letter writer, and our relationship would just crash and burn if we didn't have email. You know what I mean? It's simple as that. He knows that, and we're very honest about it.
No, email anywhere in the world.
To find out more about OnMail, call 0808 100 0101 now.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you can email anywhere, can't you? You know, the world's your oyster now. It's just one click away, as they say.
Poor cat didn't like sharing with the guys from work. He wanted his own pad, but was confused by all those mortgage rates. Until he found out that, shh, come closer, the lowest rate isn't always the cheapest mortgage. It was great to have a place of his own. For the full story on mortgages, talk to HSBC.
I'd turn all parking meters into jelly bean dispensers. Parking wouldn't be so painful.
What would you do? Tell the world and win great prizes at voteformayor.com.
I'm voting for Susan Kramer because she's not afraid to make decisions. She's a manager, and she will do the business for London and Londoners.
I will be voting for Stephen Norris because of his formidable powers of persuasion and organisation.
Welcome back, live to Who Wants to Be a London Mayor? Now, few would deny that the bizarre saga of how the major parties came by their candidates came close to resembling a Whitehall farce. But perhaps the most telling feature of the campaign has been the predominance of personality over policy. When it comes to candidates, why have Londoners seemingly been more interested in who they are than what they stand for? Tony Travers, why do you think that's the case?
I think that's the case because this is a personality-driven presidential kind of office. It's very different to anything we've seen in British politics before. The whole of the population of a vast city are voting for somebody who will be both chief executive and a representative, and bringing those offices together, creating somebody so powerful in such a large city will be utterly different from anything we've ever seen in British politics before.
But you end up with a bizarre situation where there's more interest in Frank Dobson as to whether or not he's got a beard or a set of coherent policies. Was that frustrating, Frank?
Well, I don't think any of us sitting here can be blamed for the obsession of the press with the minutiae, because I've been on platforms with the other three candidates here time and time again, and we've talked about the issues that we know that Londoners are concerned about, that ordinary people ask us about, and then the news media come whirring back to all sorts of personality matters.
Susan, do you blame the media?
I think the media has just seen this as a good opportunity to have a fun story. But my campaign's been mostly out on the high streets rather than in the media. And when you go and you talk with people across London, when you're walking and talking with ordinary Londoners, they say, you know, there's been crime on my street. The window got broken in the local shop today. There's, look what's happened. The shop I used to go to, the greengrocer, has closed, and I no longer come here anymore. My community is going downhill. So that's where you deal with the issues, when you're out talking with people. Nice to be in the media, right. The real campaigns out there.
It's a big city with a big personality, and it needs a big personality mayor.
absolutely. I think that it's somewhat facile to blame the media for putting the emphasis on the leadership style. In fact, the factor X that will make any of these candidates appeal to an incredibly fragmented society is their leadership and the quality of that leadership. That, to a large degree, depends on the kind of personalities that we have here involved. In reality, if you look at the policies they put together, you couldn't put a cigarette paper between many of them.
Sure.
So at the end of the day, everything will devolve to the degree of consensus and also resonance they will be able to find in an incredibly fragmented society.
But it wasn't the media that said of one of the candidates, he's just a showbiz candidate, full of chat show lines. It was the Prime Minister on Ken Livingstone. Did that hurt?
Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? But I'm sure after the election is over, we'll settle down into a proper working relationship. I mean, the truth on all this is that people know no politician is going to change their lives. You may improve it, you may make it a bit worse. And therefore, increasingly, I think, people come to judge, is that the sort of person who, if they found my wallet, would return it with money in it? And this becomes a factor. They try and identify. That's clearly what's happened with Clinton in America.
Can I just clarify one thing before we go further? Are you taking victory for granted already?
No, I think the real danger with all this stuff about the opinion polls is that there might be a low turnout and old Steve Norris might sneak in.
The only bit you didn't like about that was old, wasn't it? You've been called a few things in your time, and some have recently suggested that the nastiest thing I could say about you this evening was that you're a Conservative.
Yeah. Can I just say that actually the truth of this, Alistair, is exactly as Tony Travers said. You see, in this country, in a general election, you walk into the polling booth and you say, who's the candidate for the party whose Prime Minister I want to lead a government, whose leader I want to lead the government? I mean, occasionally that makes, you know, you vote for some pretty odd people, and I've worked with some of them in Parliament for 20 years, and so have my colleagues here. But this is not like that. This is not a case where you can ever walk into the booth and say, who's the Labour candidate, the Liberal candidate, whatever, or the Tory candidate. You're looking at the individual qualities of an individual, exactly as we were just hearing, of somebody who has to lead London, a city of 7.2 million. That's why personality is not actually a distraction at all.
Okay,
It is the issue that counts.
Hang on a second. Max Hastings. I just want to bring two things together with Max Hastings here. Your newspaper has consistently attempted to trowel over the issues, a whole series of articles. Editorially, you may have taken your spin, but you have tried to trowel over the issues quite genuinely. What's wrong with personality being the determining factor?
I think it was always inevitable. If you're having a campaign for one person to be mayor of this city, it was bound to be a personality campaign. Also, it's too soon. This is the first time anybody's had this job. Nobody knows yet what it's worth. It really depends on whoever wins next Thursday, what he or she does with that job. And at the moment, none of the candidates know, none of us know. And one of the things that has always puzzled me a bit about Frank in this campaign, the strongest card I would have thought you had to play, Frank, was the fact that you are very close to this government, and you can reasonably expect, if you won, to have the clout with Tony Blair with the government to get things done for London, which it seems pretty unlikely at the moment that Tony Blair is going to do Ken Livingstone any favours. Why haven't you played that card?
Well, I have played that card. Time and again I've been asked by people, do you think that the fact that the Prime Minister is publicly supporting you is an embarrassment? And I've said, no, it's not an embarrassment. If you're the Labour candidate and the most popular Prime Minister, Labour Prime Minister of all time is supporting you, it's a help. And I am convinced that my relations with him and with the Chancellor of the Exchequer will be of great benefit to Londoners. And I have to say, in fairness to Max's paper, though, in fairness to Max's paper, and I think we'd all agree on this, that the Evening Standard, unlike a lot of other newspapers, has tried to deal with the issues.
Andrew Pearce.
I wanted to ask Frank one more.
Hang on, you've had more than a fair crack. Andrew Pearce from The Times.
Well, if it's about personalities, it's frankly because the Labour Party made it personal, because they spent 2 years trashing Ken Livingstone and they turned Ken Livingstone into a martyr. And the Tories too had their own problems over the implosion of Archer. Was Steve Norris in or was he out? But what I say is, we want the mayor to have a great personality. Go to New York, everybody's talking about Giuliani versus Hillary. We want the mayor to have a big personality to project London on the world stage.
And perhaps what a lot of people have said, Susan Kramer, is a candidate without quite so much political baggage. You arrived as a virtual unknown and had the instant support of your party. Did that help?
We chose one member, one vote, and that helps. But my party also made a decision. Can I say, Alistair, because I do challenge this idea that it's just personality and the policies are automatic. If they were automatic, they'd have been done over the past years. We have a London that has been neglected, and it's not going to be easy to solve those problems. Now, my party said, your background, banking, finance, a very practical view to getting hold of problems and solving them. That's the kind of job that the mayor is. And it's been shifted, I think, because the parties thought we could roll over the practical issues and just play the personality game. And if that happens, London loses.
All right, I'm going to go directly to some policy. I just want to take one very quick word from Ruth Lee down here. Do you worry that behind all of these charming personalities, there are troubling policies?
Well, I think to start with the transport point, I'd be very interested about Ken and Susan because, of course, they're very interested in the bonds, the financing by the bonds. Now, the problem is the government is going to actually tie everything up before you get hold of London Transport, isn't it? They want their public-private partnerships. They're going to have the infrastructure split into 3 companies and put out to private tender, and then they're going to have the operating companies to be actually still in the public sector. And because the Treasury said, even if you may save funds by financing through public-backed bonds, nevertheless, those savings would be offset by efficiency savings by pushing the thing into the private sector. The Treasury has decided that. And I worked for the Treasury, and I know when the Treasury decides something, I'm afraid that's tough luck for everybody else.
All right, Frank Dobson.
Just very quickly, I was going to say the Treasury is clearly wants the risk pushed from the public sector to the private sector. The government's going to make these decisions. How are you going to live with it?
All right. Everyone will have a chance as we go along, but I want to come first of all to Frank on that particular point. Why are you and the government still wedded to a policy that wants to share the ownership and control of the tube between the private and the public sector, when every single bit of research suggests that that's the one thing the public don't want?
Well, it isn't proposed to share the control and operation of the tube at all. The control and operation, every aspect of the operation of the tube, even if there are public-private partnerships for the infrastructure, every aspect of the operation, the trains, the track, the signals, the stations, will all be in the hands of London Underground. But the reason why I say we need to look at the public-private partnership approach is that it worked with the Docklands Light Railway. The Docklands Light Railway was a public-private partnership. It was completed early. It was completed to the original estimated price. Compare that with the Jubilee Line extension, with a traditional contract, which is the sort of thing that Ken and Susan want to have, and that was £1.5 billion more than it was supposed to cost, and it was 2 years late, and it's still not working properly. And if
point taken. Point taken. Hang on a minute. Ken Livingstone. Let me move it along a bit and come back in again later on. But Ken, you couldn't be more public. Your posters say you don't save the tube by taking the party line, but you've just come up with the old socialist line. No attempt to experiment, nothing new to be tried out.
Not at all. I'm saying let's not be ideological. Let's borrow the money the cheapest we can get it, and then bring in a respectable and proven track record firm in civil engineering to do the work. Because I agree, the present dullards running London Underground can't manage it. But it's just because the last government let a contract for the Jubilee Line without penalty clauses and didn't tie them to a time and a price is no reason you can't use that sort of contract. The private sector do it every day of the year in every country around the world.
Then what's your problem with him? If you've just said that, you can write the right contract, you can have the right clauses. What's wrong with PPP?
Because you don't break up the simple command structure that you've got there.
He's not going to. Just said he wasn't
you
going
are.
to.
You're going to have 3 different firms running the underground lines and one overarching tube manager doing the day-to-day servicing. So you're going to have a nightmare of 4 separate operations. We've seen what that did on British Rail. We saw the implications for safety. And that's clearly come out of Southall and Paddington. You break up the simplicity of that structure of control. You open the way to danger in terms of safety cuts.
Is he right?
No. Sadly not, but then why spoil a good story? The reality is The reality is, for example, that actually the safety record on the railway now, the Evening Standard made the point just a couple of weeks ago, is actually better than it was. Probably sounds better if you say it's worse, but it's actually better. But the most important thing is you talk about breaking up control. Let me tell you, as the only person who's actually had a ministerial input to the tube system for nearly 5 years. I mean, what's happening on the Piccadilly line is actually separate from what's happening on the Northern line. I don't think you have to be a brain surgeon to work that out. So the idea that you should actually have a different maintenance team on one line from the other is perfectly straightforward. And I do just want to emphasise the point that Ruth Lee made. When the government has said that it is determined that we will have simply public-private partnership, that we'll buy the most efficient system of managing the system, they are not going to say to Ken Livingstone, you can operate by some different set of rules, for goodness sake. You can't just make it up as you go along. You've got to work within an intelligent framework with government.
Susan, you're close to Ken on that.
Close, we're not identical. But let me say this, I think this is absolutely crucial. What the government has said, and I will hold them absolutely to it, is that they will not sign one single contract for this public-private partnership until they have done a fair and independent comparison against the plan that I have brought forward to do the financing through revenue bonds, keeping the tube in public ownership. And it is that point when you look at that comparison and see that you're saving £1 billion in costs of financing, that it makes a key difference. And what is absolutely true, the tube needs two things. It needs good management and it needs cheap financing.
Okay,
and you bring both of those in by keeping it in public ownership. That's raising the financing for bonds.
We began with an objective appraisal. I want to finish with an objective appraisal over here. Yeah? Yeah. Is what Ken proposes to do viable, or is he going to end up in court for weeks and months?
I think it is true, exactly what Ruth Lee said. The deals are going to be signed by the government and with sort of ribbons on them and handed across to the mayor. The question of whether a mayor who wins on May the 4th, 5th can then spend a year in a war of attrition with the government as they try to sign them is a question to address to the candidates who either inherit it, well, who will inherit it. The winner will inherit what the government hands them. But there will be this period between May this year and May next year when the government will be finalising it all, and that will be a period when a mayor could, if they chose to, have a go at the government. But
OK, Tony Travers, thanks very much indeed. We're going to have more Susan, Steve, Ken and Frank exchanges after the break. But first, another photo voting opportunity for some of those prepared to put their reputations on the line for them.
I'm voting for Ken Livingstone because he is the people's man, and you can look at him in the eyes and definitely trust him.
I'm voting for Frank Dobson because he's an honourable man, he's got a decent track record, and I think he'll get things done for Londoners.
I'd tax all tourists £1 a day and use the money to improve on health services in London.
What would you do? Tell the world and win great prizes at voteformayor.com.
This is my little island. When I was small, it seemed so big. But now I know where every step will lead. On your island, the roads go on forever, and some cars do the same. I see myself in a Toyota Corolla, heading for somewhere far away, but as sure to get there as I am on my little island. Then my world will seem very big again.
The new Toyota Corolla with VVTi.
Can't do it in life? Do it on the web with the power of the Pentium 3 processor. Find out how to get even more from the Pentium 3 processor at intel.co.uk.
What do I like about Amy? Let's see. There's a lot of things that we have in common. She likes to run, like me.
I am so bad. I am nothing but a bad person. Yes, Doctor. I'm so happy. happy I can be myself.
The one cheetah just stared when I changed my legs. Just stared. I'm gonna run with the cheetahs and the antelope. It's a total feeling of accomplishment.
Visit peoplebank.com to find lots of great career opportunities. Right now, Pret A Manger are looking for energetic and lively retail managers and team members with a sense of fun. To apply, just visit peoplebank.com. The right people for the job.
Buongiorno, io mi chiamo Lucia e faccio la guida turistica di Milano. Voglio ringraziare di cuore British Midland. Ora che ci portate qui tanta gente, il mio lavoro va a gonfie vele ed io ho la piscina che ho sempre sognato. Grazie, grazie. Grazie, grazie.
Milano con British Midland.
Last year, NatWest helped 67,000 people break away and set up their own business.
I'm voting for Stephen Norris because he's strong on transport, city-friendly, and will hopefully give Tony Blair a run for his money.
I'm going to be voting for Susan Kramer because I think she has the intelligence, the background in banking and in transport, and the poise to be a good mayor of London.
Welcome back to Who Wants to Be a London Mayor? The quartet with us do, alongside 7 other candidates whose names appear on your screens right now. The polls open in just over a day's time, and we have only a few more minutes in which to quiz the main contenders for the job of running one of the world's greatest cities. Ken Livingstone, you got a warm welcome recently when you attended the Police Federation by telling them for years they'd been underpaid. Are you going to leave it at that?
Oh no, the mayor's got to make certain you get not just the pay of police, but nurses and teachers. It costs about a quarter more to live in this city. And the private sector, a lot of people have kept up. But a lot of people in the public sector haven't. And it's no good having a city where you haven't got enough teachers and nurses and police officers, because that means the whole quality of life is undermined. And you've got to put the issue of London waiting firmly back on the agenda. And the government has neglected this for 20 years. And we've seen the deterioration of all of our public services. And the mayor's got to fight for the funding. We put £19 billion a year more into national government than we get back. And the successful mayor is not going to be the one that increases taxes on Londoners, but gets Londoners a fair share of what they're already paying.
Susan Kramer, you've gone for the middle number on how many extra police officers we want at 3,000. How are you going to do that?
Well, can I just say one thing about that meeting at the Police Federation? Ken was the only one of us that didn't make a statement to that group, for whom it was a very tough statement, that we would implement the Lawrence inquiry. And it really is important that you say the same thing to each audience, no matter what their response will be.
Why didn't you make that statement?
I think, frankly, given that I've campaigned with the Lawrences for years and was chair of the Anti-Racist Alliance and firmly state in my manifesto that I will implement all of them, I don't think you actually need to tell the police I have a record of anti-racism. I got a lot of criticism from that 20 years ago. I'm glad the world is catching up.
Glenn Smythe, do the police... Do the police know all they need to know about Ken Livingstone?
Sorry, Alistair, could you repeat
Do the
that?
police know all they need to know about Ken Livingstone?
I think that Ken is a very well-known political character, certainly in the London area and perhaps nationally. And of course, I think that that meeting was a very interesting meeting because it gave a very strong message to all the candidates that the Metropolitan Police is bleeding to death, basically, and we've been offered a band-aid. Now, unless whoever is the mayor brings some political pressure to bear upon particularly the Treasury, there will be the equivalent of some more London boroughs effectively without any police cover, which is why potentially in the St Pancras area there are people shooting up in phone boxes.
Frank Dobson, is Trevor Phillips the man to do that, or putting it bluntly and crudely, is he a token gesture?
No, Trevor Phillips isn't a token gesture. Trevor Phillips is a well-known London journalist, as you know, who's been an investigative journalist and done a great service to the people of London. And so I think, as my deputy mayor and therefore automatically a member of the Metropolitan Police Authority, he would bring great authority to that position. And it would also be symbolic. It would also be symbolic, both for the Metropolitan Police and for the whole of London, for someone black to be the chair of the Metropolitan Police Authority.
1 in 4 of your top staff will be from ethnic minority groups as well. How are you going to really do that?
Oh yes, for goodness sake. Are you saying that in a GLA that was actually, let's say, 400 strong, 500 strong, you can't find 125, 150
but you haven't named any names yet, and how are you going to achieve it? It's a genuine question.
I think the important thing is actually that you should look across at all of the talent that's available in the Assembly, that all of the talent that's available in London, and you should choose the best. And I think that's actually what Londoners demand. I think Londoners would be appalled at the idea that the mayor simply took his or her immediate cronies and just filled every vacancy along that basis. It wouldn't represent London, and frankly, I don't think it would last long.
OK. Job creation and the environment are amongst issues that have not had a heavy airing. Is that where you would start if you could do one thing overnight if you were elected, Susan Kramer?
In addition to transport, jobs are absolutely the top. I mean, we have the threat now, frankly, of a possible closure of Dagenham. I hope that does not happen and that the government can stem that. But we face a reality in this city that in our most deprived communities, we have unemployment often over 40%. We look wealthy to the rest of the world we aren't. And we need not just training for the existing jobs, we also need jobs in communities. And that's why I want community banks to get small business going, local business going, jobs inside our communities, and across a whole range of skills. We must tackle that, and sometimes, too, we have to tackle discrimination with it.
Ken, the one thing that you would like to change on the landscape, overnight, as it were, if you really could, if you were elected?
You've got to give kids that were failed by the education system a second chance. We've got a whole generation who've grown up and now having their own kids who've never had a secure job, in and out of menial jobs, often long periods on the dole. If you go back to those people now and say, we'll give you the chance to get the skills you didn't get at school, work with the private sector, local government, the government social exclusion unit, I think most of those people will grab at the chance because they've seen the future that waits them.
There's something on the smaller scale, Andrew Pearce, that worries you, that you'd like them to do.
Well, we were talking about telephone boxes earlier, and of course it's not only people shooting up in telephone boxes. You go into any telephone box in central London today, you'll see a variety of cards advertising a number of services you never see in the tourist trail. They involve leather, whips, buxom blondes. I wonder which of the...
got the drift,
You've got the drift. Would the candidates...
You want them banned?
Would the candidates ban them, or would they take a more relaxed view and maybe go down the Amsterdam route and make the red light district of London a big tourist attraction?
Steve Norris.
No, actually, fun enough, you want to be quite tough. Because, no, if you're tough about it, you see, the problem always with this sort of problem is that it's all about sort of a sense of anarchy. It's about a sense of nobody being in control. And I think that's actually what's so... that is actually the problem with graffiti, with vandalism, with, with postbox, with telephone boxes, with cards in and so on. They're all evidence of a system that nobody bothers to control. That actually makes people much more fearful than they need to be in a city where they ought not to be in fear of crime.
Susan, you've said that you want to clean up London.
No, I mean, I think this is often a city that looks filthy and unloved, and most of us don't want it that way. It's one of the reasons I said I'm going to ask the government, will you let me put a tax on hotel rooms, just a small 2% tax, take that cash and get this place cleaned up. Graffiti, rubbish, all the other kinds of problems that make our city look less than it can be. We could be a great place.
Frank, the dream that may twist things.
I think London's biggest problem for at least a decade is it's just been drifting along. And I think that London would benefit enormously from having an elected mayor and an elected assembly to give some strategic guidance, to give help to people who are trying to make London a better place, to press the government for more resources, but above all, to give a lead to make the place safer and cleaner and healthier and more prosperous.
In a little over 30 hours, the polls open, and we've got just under 30 seconds left to ask these people to tell us why Londoners, having listened to all of the arguments, should vote for them. Once again, Steve Norris was the first out of the hat. Steve Norris, 30 seconds. Why should we vote for you?
Well, I think it's actually been very clear tonight. You've got a choice. The choice is essentially between Ken and myself. It's a choice between action and politics. It's a choice between whether or not you want to use the mayoralty as a political football to kick around, to poke Mr. Blair in the eye with a stick, no doubt to have views on every international incident that arises, or whether you actually want to use the office of mayor to make life better, to make it a better life for every Londoner, old or young, black or white, gay or straight, outer London or inner London, male or female.
Susan Kramer. Susan Kramer, 30 seconds. Go on, Susan.
Well, let me say this. You all know that transport is the most serious problem the mayor has to tackle. I intend to do that. We must also revitalise our communities and we must reduce crime. So I say to you, you're going to be surprised on May 4th, my friend. I say to you, give me your first choice vote and I will tackle London's tubes, trains and buses. Give me your first choice vote, and I will tackle crime.
Susan, that's 30. Thank you.
We can do it together.
Thank you.
We can do it.
Ken Livingstone.
I mean, the London that I grew up in the 1950s, it was safe for a kid like myself to wander around, visit the zoo, the museums, the parks. My parents didn't have to worry. I was in my 20s before I met an unemployed person, and I never saw a young person sleeping on the streets. If I've been mayor for 4 years, I hope at the end of it, the London we're living in will be more like the London I grew up in than the London it's become.
Thank you. Finally, Frank Dobson.
Seven out of 10 Londoners say that they would like to leave. I honestly don't believe that that's what they mean. I believe what they mean is we'd stay if only. If only the air was cleaner, if only the streets were safer, if only travelling wasn't a nightmare, if only the schools were better, if only the jobs were staying and growing. And I want to turn those ifs into reality.
Thank you all very much indeed. That's almost it from all of us here in the Assembly Hall Church House in Westminster. By the end of next week, London will have its first political leader since Margaret Thatcher brought the curtain down on the GLC 14 years ago to the month. Who wants to be a London mayor? They do, but you decide and vote. From all of us here, a very good night to you.
Sunday, April the 30th, the last Sunday before the polls close in the historic vote for London's first ever elected mayor, and a Super Sunday on ITV. A spectacular afternoon event packed with celebrities, razzmatazz and politics. The candidates are invited to meet the voters amid the buzz and excitement of the Coin Street Festival in the heart of the capital on the south bank of the Thames. That's Super Sunday this Sunday on ITV.